I'm going to start us off sort of officially here, and I'm going to go back and ask you some questions related to what you just said. Today is Wednesday, April 25th, and this is Jennifer Paustenbaugh. I'm here in the Angie DeBow room in the OSU library with Dr. David Schmidly, who's been president at OSU from 2003 to 2007. This is the second time that we've met to talk about his presidency here at OSU, as well as some of his life experiences. We've just been talking about the Dust Bowl in West Texas and Tim Egan's book, The Worst Hard Time, and some of his experiences with his family. And you had mentioned in our first interview that you had grown up on a cotton farm. And so I guess one of the things that interested me about that is that I assume that your parents probably weren't college educated, that you were the first member of your family to receive a college education. Was that something that was always part of your plan, or that you received encourament to do, or how did that really come about?
Well, it was a result of my parents. They were not educated. Both of them finished high school. Then Dad, of course, came back from the war, and his father had lost a leg, so he took over the farming to support not only my mother and myself and my brother, but to support his parents. Wow. For some reason, I guess it was just the luck of the draw, my dad could see that agriculture didn't have a long-term future. He used to tell me that. He would say, you know, this water is going to give out, the world economy will change. And my mother was a real stickler about doing well in school. And she was also a real stickler about reading and taking care of business. And so I only went to town on Saturdays, and Mother would take me to the library and she'd make me check out a book. She had to approve it. It couldn't be just some, you know, just ordinary book. And then I had to read it during the week. I had to tell her what was in it, and I'd take it back next week and exchange it for another book.
Also
and that went on
by her, right?
and that went on year round. Okay. And then I remember when I went to school, the first day I went to first grade, my dad drove me in his old pickup truck, and he took me up to the school, and he said, "Now look, boy," he said, "you're here to learn. I expect good work, and God help you if you get in trouble, because it's going to get a lot worse when you get home." And he said, "So you behave, you do your work, and this is what will make something out of you." So as long as I lived with my parents, education was stressed. And so as a result, I ended up, from parents that never went to college, I ended up not only going to college, getting my PhD, having a successful career in academia, and my brother ended up with a law degree, and he's a successful attorney in North Carolina. And I think that really does show the power of education.
Right.
And for some reason, my folks understood that. I have many other friends that I grew up with who their ambition was to go back and farm, and most of them didn't make it. A few of them did, but most of them didn't, because the hard times came economically and they just couldn't keep up.
Right.
I've always considered myself very fortunate because of the parents I had. They were good people, and I considered myself very fortunate to grow up on a farm. You know, we didn't have a TV and we didn't have a telephone until we moved to town, and I was almost 14, 15 years old. And so I spent a lot of time outdoors. That's where I got my interest in animals. I was always chasing lizards, ground squirrels, gophers, bats, you name it. I had my hands on it. And I learned to work. My father made me work, and he held me accountable. And those were, I often tell people, will say, well, where'd you get your best education? Was it at Texas Tech or A&M or the University of Illinois? And I would say, no, I got my best education on Chick Schmidly's cotton farm. I learned to work, I learned to be accountable, I learned to be responsible, and I learned to take care of myself and to not depend on other people. And I learned to not make excuses for things. My dad was a no excuse person. You know, he just wouldn't have it. And so those are traits that have had a lot to do with my success.
Well, you're indeed fortunate. It seems like more and more students these days have to wait until they get to college to either learn those traits really quickly or to not be very successful.
Society's a lot different than when I grew up. But I grew up again in a different, I didn't grow up in the city. I grew up out on a country farm. You know, I rode a school bus. There wasn't much opportunity to get in trouble.
Right. Well,
there wasn't much, there wasn't a TV and there wasn't a telephone, so there wasn't much idleness. And you pretty much, if you weren't in school, you worked, or I played baseball. My dad was a big baseball.
Okay.
And so, and there were a lot of kids that lived on the farm in those days. And so it wasn't like we didn't have social interactions, because we did. The farmers built a community house, and the families would go there once or twice a week. And my mother, she prepared most of our own food. She canned vegetables, we raised gardens, we had livestock. We were we took care of ourselves, and we were raised that way. And we were raised to work. And I'm very thankful for how I was raised.
Well,
It's carried me well in life.
right. Well, I know you commented in our first interview some of these same characteristics you saw as characteristics of our student population here, that a lot of them were raised in rural areas where they were used to working hard and being, you know, on multiple teams and activities and that kind of thing. So I'm sure that's helped you to relate so well to those students too.
Well, you know, if you talk to a lot of people that hire OSU graduates and you ask them why, they will tell you character, work ethic, and citizenship. And if you look at these young people on this campus and you get to know them, you can see that most of them really are that way. They come out of these little old small Oklahoma towns. They've done everything. You know, ever since they could walk, they were showing livestock or doing something. They were, you know, they played on teams. They did all sorts of things, and they have confidence as a result of that. And they have a great work ethic, and they're good people. I mean, they're just people you can count on. And they come here and they get a very good education. And so they're just the kind of people that employers want to hire, because you get not only a well-educated person, but you get a good person.
Right. Well, one of the things that I didn't ask you about the last time as far as our students go is how students are ambassadors for the university. And I know that you had formed the President's Posse while you were here. Could you talk a little bit about that group and their role and why you feel that that was important?
Well, I have learned over the years that most people that come to visit a campus would rather meet your best students than they would anybody else. There's something about being around good young people that is just, it's uplifting.
Makes you feel like there's hope for the future.
Yeah, it does, and it just makes you feel good. And so we had done a similar thing at Texas Tech that was really popular. So instead of having a bunch of old folks around the suite at a football game, for example, we brought in our best and brightest students. And so we decided to do the same thing here, and Janet actually came up with that name, the President's Posse. And we interviewed students. You had to apply to be in it. It didn't cost us much. It cost us the price of a t-shirt or a nice shirt. And then the students would sign up to host important guests that came on the campus. And I think it was good for the students. They got to meet a lot of really good people. But it was really a great way to showcase the quality of Oklahoma State students to our visitors. And I got so many compliments from visitors that would say, we enjoyed the football game, but the highlight was not the victory or not the game. The highlight were the wonderful students you had in your suite. They were really good people, and it's obvious to see why you like doing what you're doing. So it was a very good organization, and it was good for both students and good for the university.
Now, another force that you've sort of marshaled while you were here are the parents of these students through the formation of the Parents Association, and it really seems like that will be Janet's legacy here is the formation of that group. But could you, and she talked a lot about it, but could you talk a little bit about it? And
well, it was her idea, but I was really anxious to see her do it and encouraged her because you know, we had been when we were at Texas A&M, the Mothers Clubs. They had the Aggies Mothers Clubs. And I have never seen anything like it in my life. I remember one time the governor, Ann Richards was the governor of Texas, and she did something that the A&M mothers didn't like. And in one day, they wore out 3 or 4 fax machines in the governor's mansion. And she called Bill Mobley, who was the president, and I knew Bill, and she said, "Bill, I'm changing my mind. Just get those mothers off my back." And Bill told me, he said, "You know, Dave," he said, "if you ever want anything done," he said, the group I use the most are the Aggie mothers. If I need something really done, and there's a lot of political clout there."
Right.
So when Janet said she wanted a parents organization, I thought, well, you know, that's going to be good because our parents come from every county in Oklahoma.
Right.
If we can get them signed up and on board, they can become our ambassadors. And the parents also, they're having to pay enough for their son and daughter's education now that they, in my opinion, have a right to have a little more input. Mm-hmm. And the other thing that Janet and I learned through the Parents Association at Texas Tech was their input was excellent. They had good ideas. And so I was just really proud of what she was able to get done. It's growing, it's going to continue to grow. And I think when you look back on it, that'll be one of the main legacies of the Schmidlys at Oklahoma State will be what my wife did to form that Parents Association.
Well, it's an amazingly vital group for being so young of a
group. It really is. And, you know, they'll raise money for scholarships. They will. We were just talking about this terrible tragedy at Virginia Tech.
Yes.
And how to make sure that nothing like that ever happens here. Janet's point was, well, you need to get the Parents Association involved. It's their children, and they should have something to say about what kind of security systems we have on the campus. So I just think they're a good group. They're all over the state. They can help the university politically, but they also can help it by knowing what our students need the most.
Right. Well, we had talked a little bit about faculty and about students as being, and parents now as some important constituencies, mm-hmm. and I wanted to move on to athletics, and we talked about this a little bit the last time, but as I mentioned before we started the interview, that due to some technical difficulties, some of that was lost, and so I just wanted to first talk a little bit about student athletes. And one of the things that we had talked about before was the role of student athletes as ambassadors, and specifically the case of Bill Spears. And if you could kind of talk about that.
Well, you know, athletics it's so important in the American public that it gets a lot of attention nationwide. And if you have a really good athletic program, then it can bring it can create a very positive impression of your university. You know, some people call it the front porch to the university, and I think there's some truth to that in the general public's mind. The question is, can you do it right? And doing it right means more than just winning. It means your student athletes go to class, they perform well in the classroom, they graduate, they behave, and they become good ambassadors to the university. When all of those things happen, then the impression the public gets of your university, people that have never been to Oklahoma, is that Oklahoma is a good place and Oklahoma State is a good place, or it wouldn't have young men and women representing it like this. Mm-hmm. And when it doesn't happen properly, like in the case of the University of Colorado where they had that terrible scandal,
yes,
then it creates a negative perception about a university that's probably wrong, and it takes you a lot of money and a lot of time to overcome that. And we've had some great ambassadors as student athletes. And recently we had a great basketball team, went to the Final Four, that had all of its players had graduated by the time they played in the Final Four. I think that's true, or all but one had. And that caught the attention of a person who had graduated from OSU many decades ago, but had sort of lost interest in the university. And Bill Spears is who it was. And then Bill actually contacted us. We had lost sort of track of Bill, and he said, I want to help you. I was really impressed with that basketball team and the kind of young men you had on that team. And that got us reacquainted with Bill. Mm-hmm. And it turns out that while Bill was sort of brought back to us for that reason, his real interest was academics, because he had been a very good student here. And he had, I think Bill's degree was in accounting. And Bill said, I want to do something to help you academically. So he ended up endowing the business school. And there is a good example of how a good athletic program with good people in it can help benefit the academic mission of the university.
Right. And that became our first endowed
That's
college.
Our first endowed college. And Bill, to this day, remains, he was just here yesterday, he remains very actively engaged in OSU. He's up here every year. I think will do even more for the university in the future, and he's going to have the capability to do that.
Well, I just think that's a great story.
It is a great story. And that was not only a great basketball team, but it was a great group of young men that have gone on to all be successful in life. And they were quality students and quality people and good players, and that reflected well on the university.
Well, it seems like during your tenure that you've had your share of tragedies too with our student athletes. I think about Vernon Grant and what a big loss that was, not only to the football team but to the student body. And then Kimber Eaton, her situation, which didn't end as a tragedy but sure looked like it was going to be. And even Darren Williams, who was an alum but also highly visible. What, in your role as president, what do you think is important for the university and the community to hear at a time like that, when there's that kind of loss?
Well, you never know when there's going to be loss, and you can't control it. When there is, I think you have to reflect back on the life involved. And if you reflect back on Vernon was a remarkable human being. I mean, this kid grew up with almost nothing, and he was a great football player. He was an even better student. I mean, he was over a 3-point student in engineering, and he just lit the world up. He would come by my office. He'd come in, he'd give me 5. He always had this little do-rag on. And he looked around my office and he said, Doctor, he said, I'm going to have an office like this someday. And that was such an incredible loss. It was a loss to humanity. It wasn't just a loss to a football team. I mean, the human race lost a very special individual. A guy that, he was full of optimism. He always had a smile. He worked hard. He made no excuses. And he was a quality person. Timber is the same way. We had a different outcome there, thank God, if you look at what she's overcome. And that's one of the great things about sports, and being around athletes and kids that they overcome tragedy. In Vernon's case, it was unavoidable. He couldn't. But you have to, Vernon will always be remembered here. I think Mike Holder and his wife have endowed a scholarship in Vernon's name. And, I don't think a season of football will go by without somebody reflecting on Vernon and what he meant to Oklahoma State. I went to Vernon's funeral, and I've been to a lot of difficult funerals in my life, but I've never been through one that impacted me more emotionally than that, because I knew Vernon well, and I loved him because he personified, in my view, exactly what a student athlete is all about. Competitiveness, hard work, being just as good in the classroom, being just as competitive there as he was on a football field. And no excuses, just hard work and do the best you can in both the classroom and athletics. And the sad thing is that the world is not going to see the result of the kind of person that Vernon truly was.
Well, a little bit off of the subject of student athletes, but sort of as a follow-up in regards to tragedy, and you've already mentioned what happened at Virginia Tech on April 16th. What role does a president have in helping a university cope with a situation like that?
Well, I think you have to be strong, and you have to be the person that guides the healing process. I'll tell you, a person that did it better than anyone I've ever seen was Jim Halligan here. I was president of Texas Tech when the plane crash occurred, and Jim's demeanor, his character, his just general love of people, and the way that whole situation was handled in the aftermath of it is what a president has to do. And I've been impressed with what the president of Virginia Tech has done. You know, he's not been in the limelight. That's not what it's about.
Right.
But being the person that people can talk to, being strong, sending the message of what the university really stands for, and making sure that parents and loved ones that have suffered through this know that the university is there for them and always will be there for them. It's a leadership role. It's a very difficult one. It's one that a lot of people aren't up to. I've never had to go through it like Jim Halligan or the president of Virginia Tech. I hope I never do. But I've certainly had a good teacher in Jim Halligan, because I talked with Jim over the phone when it happened and expressed my condolences, and all of us, the other presidents in the conference, watched how he handled it, and the way he did it was exemplary to all of us, and I think he showed us the way.
Well, do you think that what happened at Virginia Tech is going to be just some sort of, sort of media blip, or do you think that in higher education and on college campuses that there will be some lasting impact?
Oh, I don't think there's any question it's going to change the landscape of campuses, and I suspect it will be dramatic, just like Columbine was for public education. I mean, already some 500 schools have signed up with some security company that gives instant messaging. And then I think you're going to look at schools evaluating every aspect of their security. There's going to be a lot of discussion about whether people should be on campus with guns or not. I mean, in Utah now, it's possible, I think as a result of a Utah law, for students that have permission and go through testing, et cetera, to be able to carry concealed weapons. There'll be a lot of discussion about, if that law had been in place in Virginia, would you have had a different outcome? And I don't know the answer to that. I'm not a big fan of just general weaponry around, but there's going to be that conversation. Just the general, there'll be a lot of talk about what's happening in society. You know, we continue to see violence being more and more the outcome of people's frustration. One could argue that that's either a failure of values or a failure of education or a failure of a lot of things. And I think there may be some actual education efforts that need to be interjected into the curriculum about how to handle and manage frustration in ways that don't require you to use violence. But this was a very troubled young man, that's very obvious, and there'll be a lot of discussion about when people see people like this and they report them to a university, the procedures for how that's handled is going to be looked at very closely, and I suspect there'll be a lot of changes. So I expect the impacts to be fairly major. I think it's going to be hard to, I've been to one college campus that had what I can call really good control of security in terms of who got on the campus and who got off. And that was the University of the Americas in Pueblo, Mexico. And they fundamentally had the whole campus perimeter fenced with about a 10-foot chain link fence. And they had guards. And when you came onto the campus, if you were a faculty member, you had to show your faculty card. If you were a student, you had to show your student card. And if you were a visitor, you had to say who you were going to visit, and they called and verified whether you had.
Almost like a military base.
It was. And yet that attracted them a lot of students because parents that were sending their students abroad that visited that university saw the security, and they became very comfortable that their son or daughter would be very safe there. I've never seen that at any U.S. university. At Texas Tech, we did have little stations, and we had the interior of the campus was closed off. You couldn't drive on it. And you know, if you were a visitor, you had to get a visitor's permit, and you had to park in a certain place. We had a little bit of control, but I don't think it would have prevented necessarily anything like this. I don't know how you prevent something like this unless your counselors really pick up on it. And in this case, it's unfortunate that the state laws weren't consistent with the federal laws, and he was able to purchase that weapon.
Right. Because
clearly he should not have been able to purchase that weapon. That would have been the main control point. And I think that there'll be a lot of conversations about that too.
Well, it is interesting how much more aware faculty have to be about mental health issues, and I think there's seeing a lot more incidences of that.
Well, there are, it's well documented the number of children that are coming out of our public schools that are under some sort of medication for anxiety or depression. It's higher than, when I came out of school, I didn't even know what depression was. We didn't.
People didn't have time to be depressed at that.
You've got anxiety. What's that mean? It was just not part of the conversation.
Right.
And it's changed so much, and it could be there needs to be some training of faculty about how to pick up on this and how to work with students, because most faculty aren't trained in this area, and if you're not careful, you can infringe on people's rights, and you can do things you shouldn't do.
Well, it's hard to strike the right balance.
It really is, and normally, if you're expected to do that, you need some training for it, and that could be one of the outcomes of this. Is there will be some mandatory training for faculty to learn how to recognize some of these symptoms, and training about specifically what to do when you do recognize it.
Well, turning back to athletics, I think you talked about one of the most challenging things that Jim Halligan had to face as president was the death of these 10 individuals who were closely associated with the university through the men's basketball team. And I think, again, men's basketball proved to be one of the most difficult issues that you had to face in terms of the situation with Eddie Sutton and his the accident that he had, and that whole situation. Can you talk a little bit about that and how you were able to balance all these competing interests of alumni and people that loved Eddie Sutton and people that thought that Eddie Sutton needed to, face justice? And
yeah, that was very difficult. One of the things you have to understand is how much I personally like Coach Sutton and admired him. And he certainly has done far more good in his career than he's ever done bad. And that made this very difficult. The approach, though, I had to take was one, that the behavior was such that you can't condone it. And the behavior was such that for any employee, you would take very serious action. And I felt that given where the coach was in his career, that the best thing to do was for him to retire as coach and then just move on and get his health back, get this problem behind him, and reflect back on the good things about his career. I also felt that was in the best interest of the university overall. And that it was just not possible for him to return as coach. That was my perspective, given the full set of circumstances and the standards that we hold all of our employees to. And that was not easy for Coach Sutton because he's a man of great pride. He's a very good person, a very good person. And it was difficult for him because he was close to winning his 800th game. I think there was a side of him that really wanted to come back and coach again, have a little chance to get well, and then step back into that role. But I just didn't feel as leader of the university we could do that. At the same time, I did not want to fire Coach Sutton. There was a time when the university didn't have a lot going for it back in the late 80s, early 90s. It was really struggling. It was struggling to attract students. And Coach Sutton came back here. He built a basketball program that drew national attention. He graduated his players. The players conducted themselves well. Coach conducted himself very well. And he brought back a lot of the pride and image, and he made people feel good again about Oklahoma State, really good. And I felt like that had to be respected. And that as bad as this situation was, it was not something that should cause us to just summarily say you're through. And so we just, and the good thing was we were dealing with a good person, a really good person. And I felt like given enough time that Coach would do the right thing and he would come to the same conclusion I had. And so we just gave it time. Now, some people were critical that we waited too long, but I felt Coach had deserved that we wait and be patient and let him reach his own conclusion. And he did. He reached the conclusion that, it's time for me to turn this thing over to my son and step aside. And I think that was the best possible outcome, and for him and for us, for the university.
It must have been difficult to wait for that outcome to.
Well, it was. There was a lot of public pressure. There's always Monday morning quarterbacks and people that, right. and drunk driving is a big issue these days. When I was growing up, it wasn't. I mean, it wasn't. You didn't. But there have been too many innocent people victimized by it, and society has limited, if any, tolerance for it today. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people that have been victimized by a driver driving under the influence and intoxicated have lost family members, and they don't have any patience for this. And I can understand that. But in my situation, I knew that I was not going to let him coach again. But I wanted, and I felt like just being patient, Coach would reach the same decision, and that it would be a better outcome for him and for us, and that's the way it turned out.
What kind of coaching future do you think Sean has? I mean, he's sort of right now living in the shadow still.
Yeah, and that's tough. That's really tough. That's one of the toughest situations you can put a young coach in. You know, basketball is something I know a lot about. I played basketball a few years in college. I have studied it a lot. I've been around great coaches, Coach Knight, Coach Sutton. And I know one thing, Sean knows his X's and O's really well. He's a good coach. He's also a good guy. And I think that he needs to build his own program, though. You know, he's got to be Sean Sutton, not Sean Eddie's son. And I thought, you know, given the talent and the depth he had this year, I thought really he had a pretty good season. Mm-hmm. He got off to such a great start. The expectations went way up here, and they were probably way out of line. But he's had a good recruiting class. I've got a lot of confidence in Sean. But, you know, it's a tough profession. And don't think for a minute that anybody's going to give him a break because he's Eddie's son. They won't. I mean, there's nothing more competitive than athletics. And it's not going to be easy for him. But I sure hope it works out well for him. I'll be following it closely.
Well, one of the things that I think that has been very commendable about you as a human being is your willingness to give people a second chance. And you mentioned Bob Knight. Mm-hmm. There are others here like James Owen Curry. Could you talk a little bit about sort of your philosophy about that?
Well, I sort of feel this country was built on that principle. You know, a lot of the people who came over here and settled were retrobates. They were run out of Europe, right. And they came over here and they got a second chance. And you know, people aren't perfect. I mean, that's one of the things you learn, that students make mistakes. I've made mistakes in my life, and sometimes you get lucky and they don't compound as much. They really compound in athletics because it draws so much public attention. You know, you do. I mean, you look at Coach Knight, you know, he throws one chair out of how many years did he coach? And yet every time anybody wants to focus on him, you see another rerun of that. You don't see another rerun of all the great things he did for young men. So I just feel like when you're a leader, one of your duties is to be able to judge people well enough to know when they deserve a second chance. And I felt like it was a no-brainer hiring Bob Knight. I felt like it was a no-brainer letting James Owen Curry. After I met with James Owen and his mother and heard James Owen express in front of his mother how remorseful he was about the mistake he's made, I realized, in my opinion, this young man would be fine. And so those worked out well. It didn't work out as well with Prentice Elliott. You know, coaches wanted to let Prentice have a second chance, and it didn't work out. It doesn't always work out well. And you won't be perfect, but I think all in all, it's better to side on giving people a bit of a break than it is being too harsh. And you know, a lot of people just don't want the risk. When you give someone a second chance, there's some risk. And a lot of people don't, they're afraid of risk. Growing up on a farm, I'm not afraid of risk. I was
Every
never.
year is a risk.
No, now I'm smart enough to assess risk, and I am also accountable enough to know if I make a decision that doesn't work out right, I'll be accountable for it. But I think when you're afraid to take a risk, you're in real danger in terms of being a leader.
Well, another thing that you had to deal with on the athletic front was the sort of, I guess, sudden departure of Les Miles, who had been a very popular and successful coach. What is the role of the president in that kind of situation?
Well, you know, I liked Les a lot. Good coach, good guy. Did a great job here, really a good job here. But I knew, and I think that Les knew, and obviously that Les wanted to be on a bigger stage. And I had a lot of conversations with Les about this move. And my feeling in the end, and Coach and I talked about it, was, Coach, we want you to stay. We will adjust your contract a little. We're not going to be able to meet what these people can pay you because of the size of their football stadium. And second, I told him that I would certainly understood if he would accept this job because it was a major step up for him. And we weren't going to interfere with that. And I think Les made the right decision. And I told him I thought he did. I wish he would have stayed, but once this opportunity came his way, I don't think you can't blame people for taking an opportunity that they think will enhance their career. And I felt we were very fortunate to have Mike Gundy standing by. You know, we did a search, but all along we wanted to hire Mike. And we felt like, Les was hired to come in here, rebuild a program, get it headed in the right direction. And we knew if he was successful in that, he probably was going to make another step. He's a graduate of the University of Michigan. It wouldn't surprise me to see him in Michigan someday, okay? And it's like I told him, I said, the trip to Ann Arbor will be a lot easier through Baton Rouge than it will be through Stillwater. The great thing about Mike Gundy is this is where Mike wants to be. Mike Gundy could win 5 national championships in a row here, and I don't think he wants to be. I mean, he's a Cowboy. He loves Stillwater. He loves this university. This is where he wants to be. And I think that's what the university now has in its football coach. And I think Mike's going to be an exceptional coach, a really good coach.
I guess the one last question I wanted to ask you that was really focused on athletics is that, Harry Birdwell's departure from the athletic department wasn't without controversy. I think maybe because so many people had worked with Harry in different capacities over the years. But is there anything that you want to say about that situation?
Well, Harry did a good job as athletic director. He made that choice himself, that he felt like there were other things he wanted to pursue. I don't think it's any secret with a few of our big donors, he wasn't hitting it off that well. I think that put a lot of pressure on Harry. And I think in many ways Harry made the decision he made because he felt it was in the best interest of the university. Harry loved, and I think still does, loves Oklahoma State University. And I think in many ways he saw his role as AD potentially becoming an obstacle, and that he had some other career opportunities and he felt he would pursue those and give the university a chance to realize the full potential it might if someone else were in that role. So I think he made the decision partly because of his own self-interest, but also because of his belief it was in the best interest of the university. But if you look back at Harry's record as athletic director, he hired good coaches. He certainly had a lot of enthusiasm for OSU. The coaches that worked for him liked him a lot. Student athletes liked him. And he did a good job.
Well, this is a totally different theme. And I wanted to talk to you about OSU as a multi-campus system and the fact that your title since you've been here has been president and CEO of the OSU system. And during your tenure here, OSU Tulsa has really grown. But they had this, I guess their slogan was the 20 by 20 slogan of having 20,000 students by the year 2020. And do you think that it seems like maybe that's overly optimistic.
Oh yeah, I said that when I first got here. That's a nice, you get these little 20 by 20, you get a little catchy phrase and you people gravitate to it. But all you have to do is look at the demography of Oklahoma and realize that's not going to happen. I mean, the number of the projected high school graduation rate and the people going to college is flat to slowly declining in Oklahoma. So early on, I told the leaders down there that I thought we ought to get away from that and that we ought to readjust those predictions, and we did. But OSU Tulsa is doing very well. It is growing in the areas it should grow. It doesn't need to grow to 20,000 students to have a big impact on Oklahoma. What it does need to do is bring some graduate programs, some public graduate education programs into the community of Tulsa, and some research programs into Tulsa. And so when we put together the package of money to build a Helmrich Advanced Technology Center, that is going, in my opinion, to be a huge difference maker for OSU Tulsa in the state, because you're going to have graduate engineering education, public graduate engineering education, and you're going to have major high-tech research programs in Tulsa in that facility. And that will add a lot to the economy and economic development in that community. I felt when I came here, I felt that the system was the strongest asset that the institution had. That this idea of one university, multiple campuses, working under the same strategic plan, heading toward the same goals, and dispersed the way it was, just had a huge upside for Oklahoma and the ability of Oklahoma State to make a difference in this state. And if you draw an oval around those campuses, that's 80% of the people in Oklahoma. So when we did our strategic plan, we really focused on that. And we focused on talking about this one university, multiple campuses with technology education, 4-year, 2-year technology education, medical education, and the graduate education and undergraduate education here and in Tulsa. And I think that's been one of the success stories we've had. All of those campuses are doing very well. Okmulgee is we've added 4-year technology degrees. We just added a 4-year degree in Oklahoma City. That's, I think, still one of the fastest growing campuses in the state. Our medical school in Tulsa is doing better than it ever has in its history. And now with graduate education and research going onto the Tulsa campus, we have all of the pieces in place. Very importantly, we're adding 2 more sites to the OSU directory. One in Ponca City with a major research effort on sensors, and one in Ardmore in a partnership with the Noble Foundation to focus on biofuels and plant biotechnology and agrobiotechnology. And that will further spread geographically Oklahoma State. And that's important for a land-grant university. Land-grant universities are about helping all the people in the state, not just one location. So OSU has an office in every county in Oklahoma. Now it's got these, 6, 7 locations where it will be doing education, research, and public service. And you put all of that together, that's going to have a huge impact in this state.
Well, I think it is a huge asset when you are thinking about undertaking a statewide project and you realize that you already have this presence in every county in the state.
That's right.
That's a lot of barriers that you don't have to break through because...
Well, you know, we did that economic study on the economic impact of OSU in Oklahoma, and it was $2.9 billion impact. And that's because, in part, it's not just in one location. It has these multiple locations. And I think that's a great asset that the university has.
I'm going to pause here because my tape in here is about ready to run.
Okay.
Well, now I have a few questions that I guess are more personal, although not overly personal. Of all the presidents who have been here, I think that it's not an exaggeration to say that you're the one that has had the most active research agenda. You've taught, you've advised graduate students, you've continued to publish, you've lectured. How do you balance all that, and why has it been so important to you to maintain that research agenda?
Well, the heart and soul of a university scholarship. And if you're going to lead it, you need to be engaged in scholarship. That's my opinion. It's just something that's always been very personal for me. I didn't get a PhD to become a university president. In fact, I had no ambition of ever becoming a university president. It just sort of happened. I got a PhD because I wanted to be a scholar. And I made my mind up that I was never going to get away from that. I love teaching and I love working with students. I mean, why would you work at a university if you didn't like that? But I also decided early on when I got into administration that I would become known for being a university administrator still engaged in scholarship. I couldn't be as engaged as I was when I was a faculty member, but I have always maintained that engagement at every university I've been, and I will be doing it at the University of New Mexico as well. It's just part of me. It takes a little more hours. You know, a lot of those hours I'm up till 12 o'clock, 1 o'clock in the morning working on a presentation or reading a student's dissertation or thesis. Yeah, I could be sleeping or doing other things, but I don't think I'd be as effective as I've been if I didn't do that. And so it's very personal to me. It's very important, and it's just part of my style of leadership at a university president is that I'm going to be a scholar. And hopefully the faculty look up to me for it, and the students do as well.
Well, you mentioned that you didn't get a PhD to become a university president. That just sort of happened. So tell me how that did happen.
I had no interest in administration. I was really doing well as a faculty member at Texas A&M. I was publishing. I had a lot of graduate students. I had several research projects. I had a great undergraduate teaching load. I loved the department I was in. It was perfect. And we had gone through some leadership challenges in the department, and I had been asked to step in as interim department head, and I did. And I sort of rallied the troops, and we made a dramatic improvement. Then they asked me to stay as permanent department head, and I enjoyed that leadership. I really did, and so I did that, and I said, you know, I'll stay for 5 years and that's it. I've never stayed at any leadership role for longer than 5 years. And sure enough, in the 5th year, A&M had a little campus that had been a separate standalone university in Galveston called Texas A&M at Galveston.
Okay.
And they made a decision they were going to merge that back with the main campus in College Station. And I had helped develop some programs down there studying marine mammals and marine conservation science. And so because I knew the campus, A&M asked me to go down there and manage the merger of that campus back with the main campus. And that was the greatest learning environment I ever had, because that little old campus had one of everything. It had dormitories, it had a library, it had everything a big university had, but it didn't have a lot of people to run it. And so I had to learn how to do the auxiliaries, how to do the library, the buildings, the grounds. I mean, I got a tremendous experience there in how to run a campus on a small scale, but covering everything. And I loved it. And so but I stayed my 4.5, almost 5 years there. And my alma mater called, and they wanted me to come back and help them grow research and graduate education. they felt like they had lost a little traction there. This was Texas Tech. Mm-hmm. And I did that. And there I worked for probably the best two bosses I ever had, Don Harrigan and John Montford. And I learned a lot from them. I really enjoyed working for Harrigan. He was a first-rate individual, great administrator. And Don, all of a sudden, though, decided that he didn't want to be president anymore. And I'll never forget one day, he said, "Dave, you ought to apply for this. You'd be perfect for your alma mater." And I thought about it, decided I'd do it. And I was fortunate enough to be selected, and the rest is history. And so I've been pretty fortunate. Will have done three university presidencies in one career.
Yeah, that's pretty amazing.
Well, you could say it's amazing. You could say it was foolish too. You know, they're not easy.
No, I can't imagine.
But I've enjoyed the first two. I hope I enjoy the third one.
Well, how do you get, I guess, fired up to do it for the third time?
It's the challenge. The University of New Mexico really is intriguing to me because it's a university with a very strong research profile. Mm-hmm. It does almost $300 million a year in outside grants mm-hmm. and contracts, making it one of the largest public research universities in the country. But it's never been able to translate that success over into its graduation success. It has a graduation rate of under 50%.
Wow.
And so it's a challenge. How do you go in? And obviously it has a good faculty. Mm-hmm. What is wrong? What is happening there so these students are not succeeding? And that to me is a real challenge, and it really intrigues me, and it's one I think I can tackle, and I'm really fired up about it. I've got some unique ideas that are sort of out of the box for higher ed, and it's a chance also, of course, to move to a place where we're ultimately going to retire and where our son lives, and hopefully we can reunite our whole family there. And I think it'll be a good place to end my career. And I'll work there 5 years and retire.
So what's magical about 5 years?
Well, I had a good friend once that was an administrator. He told me, he said, "Dave," he said, "nobody should stay in an administrative role longer than 5 years." And I said, "Why?" And he said, "Well," he said, "you kind of wear yourself out." He said, 5 years, you've used up most of your good ideas. Mm-hmm. And he said, if you're doing your job, you've worn out most of the people around you too. And it's time. And leadership changes are not all that bad. And I thought about that, and I watched people stay in leadership roles too long. And they just sort of becomes the thing to do. You know, I watched a lot of college presidents play golf 3 days a week. And they just stay, and they stay, and they stay, and things just roll on and roll on and roll on, and I just don't have any interest in that. I'm more interested in the challenge, tackling the tough issues, getting it going, and then I'm ready to go to another challenge. That's just the way I am.
Well, you sit on several boards, on the Nostalgic Board, on the International Board of the mm-hmm. International Association of University Presidents, mm-hmm. to name two. Why has it been important for you personally to be involved in organizations like this, and why do you think it's important for OSU that you've been involved?
Well, I think it creates visibility, but the most important thing you get is you're around the people that are the leaders in the field, and you learn about new innovative things. And you learn about best practices that work at other places, and you begin to see ways that you might implement them and improve your own institution. So I'm a big believer in getting involved in leadership organizations. International education in this global economy is becoming more and more important. I'm going to stay on that board, and I'm going to stay on the board of the Association of Governing Boards of Higher Education. Mm-hmm. And I mean, I meet other presidents that are really good. They talk about things they're doing on their campuses, and little light bulbs go off and say, hey, you know, we could do that. That would make us better. And I think you get a lot of good practices as a result of that kind of interaction.
Well, it seems almost improbable to me that between, you know, being a university president and having a research agenda and wanting to spend at least some time with your family, do you have any other outside interest or things that you've put on hold that you want to pursue once you're retired? Or
No, not really. You know, I've always worked ever since I was knee-high to a grasshopper. I do, when I retire, want to get back and do more mammalogy.
Mm-hmm. Like back into the field?
Yeah, back into natural history work and the stuff that I really enjoy. It's interesting, the older I've become, the more I read. I read now more than any time in my entire life. And I just absolutely love it. I mean, I cannot go without reading all the time. And I want to continue, I want to do more reading. I don't know what's driven me in this direction. I've become fascinated by history, just fascinated by it. Almost to the point where I will probably give some thought as maybe going back and getting another PhD after I retire.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, lifelong learning, I think, is important. And I'd like to get a PhD in history or the philosophy of science and do another dissertation, and just for the heck of it. You know, just to keep me occupied. I won't be able to sit around. I'm not a golfer. I do like to hunt and fish. I like to get outdoors. I like to be around my grandkids. Janet and I like to travel. We very much like traveling, and we like to travel in cars and go, you know, to out-of-the-way places. And there will be a time in our lives where, you know, we've always wanted to do a safari in Africa. We wanted to go to Australia. I want to go to the Galapagos Islands and see what Darwin saw. And so we will do some things like that. And then I'll keep doing my mammalogy, keep reading, and maybe do another degree. I don't know. Hopefully if my health stays good.
Right. Well, I remember the very first time that I heard you speak on this campus, you talked about a study that you had just completed. In fact, your book had just come out where you had looked at the biological inventory of Texas, and you had gone back to those places 100 years later and photographed, you know, I guess you had photographs of what they were like at the time, and then photographs in the intervening 100 years. And does a project like that appeal to you again?
Well, in fact, that's interesting that you would say that. That's going to be my project in New Mexico.
Oh, okay.
There was a similar biological survey of New Mexico done by the same guy who did the Texas one, Vernon Bailey. Only his wife, Florence Bailey, who was a very accomplished ornithologist, she did the birds of New Mexico, and Bailey did the mammals of New Mexico. And this work was done between about 1910 and 1930. And all of their field notes, their documentation, and their old photographs are at the National Photographic Archives in Washington. Now, I don't know New Mexico. I knew Texas like the back of my hand. I'd been in all 254 counties in Texas.
That's an accomplishment.
It is. There aren't many people alive that can say that, by the way. Probably not even the governor of Texas. But I could literally look at a photograph in Texas and tell you within 10 miles from where it was taken. I can't do that in New Mexico, so I've got to get familiar with the geography. But one of my goals is to write something about how the natural history of New Mexico has changed, and to compare it with the change I saw in Texas. Texas is a private land state with a very large population and a completely different dynamic than New Mexico.
Which has a lot of public land.
New Mexico is a public land state with a very small population. And so by doing these two, I think will give me some insights into how land ownership and population size impacts conservation issues. And so hopefully I'll be able to do a book on New Mexico like I did on Texas. And by the way, I was going to try to do something like that in Oklahoma too, because when Oklahoma was a territory, there was quite a bit of biological work done here.
Okay. Well, and also I've heard that Oklahoma is has the third greatest ecological diversity of all of the 50 states in terms of, maybe that's not true, but in terms of the areas going from the Panhandle all the way into southeastern Oklahoma.
I don't know it would be third. It would probably be in the top dozen. Mm-hmm. And the reason is because of its location in the center of the United States. You get some eastern species that come across the Mississippi in the southeast, and they come into eastern and southeastern Oklahoma. You get the northern Great Plains species that come through the center. Mm-hmm. Then you get the southwestern species that come from Mexico and western Texas. And then you get the northern Rocky species. And then you get some southern elements that come out of the tropics. They all sort of blend in Oklahoma. And so it does have a rich fauna and flora, but it's not as rich as it is in New Mexico, where you get the mountains and the topographic relief.
That's true.
Or Arizona, or Utah, or Texas, or California. So I don't think it would be number 3.
Well, that was just a number I
But
heard
it would be,
someone.
it's certainly higher in Mississippi and,
right.
Louisiana, Alabama, the southeastern states, and most of the eastern states.
Well, I hope you can do that project in New
I
Mexico.
will do
and
that
I think
project.
the comparative aspect of it sounds really interesting. Well, let me talk to you a little bit about leadership. I know that I've heard you use the expression getting the right people on the bus, which I don't think is your expression, but
headed in the right direction.
Headed in the right direction, the other key part of that. How did you go about building your team here?
Oh, well, about like I have at every place I've been. I like to have a few veterans, okay? People that know where all the skeletons are, what's been tried in the past, what's worked, what hasn't worked. And I like to have a mixture of new people that come in with new ideas that don't care about what happened in the past. Above all, I like for my people to want to be on a team, to care more about the good of the organization than their own personal role in it. And I think we've done a really good job of building a team here. In fact, I would say you could make a pretty good case that maybe the most important thing I did here was build that kind of team. I had some veterans that had been at it a long time, Dave Bosserman, Lee Bird, Steve McKeever, very good people, excellent, good administrative skills, buying into the teamwork idea, and really enjoying being part of a team. The presidents of the other branches were all that way, except we needed new leadership at the medical school. We brought in John Fernandez there. And then I sort of rounded the team out by bringing in maybe my most important hire. I would say 2 of them would have been Marlene, who's now the our interim president. She is a marvelous provost. I just can't imagine you could find a better one anywhere in the country. And she did a great job here of working with the faculty and working with the other vice presidents. All of them reported to me, but they all had a dotted line through Marlene, and I used an old Winston Churchill saying about Marlene. I said she was first among equals. And she was great. And the other person that was really great was General Al Goodberry, who came in as chief of staff. When you try to run 5 campuses as multidimensional as these are, and you got all the things going on this campus, you really have to have a talented integrator. And Al is one of the most talented and best organized people I've ever been around, and just genuinely good. I mean, Al doesn't have an evil bone in his body. He's not out to get anybody. All he wants is good things for his alma mater. And he was a key linchpin in all of this by keeping everybody well informed, well communicated with. And we would have never been able to accomplish what we have without the general. And then we brought in, I had some that didn't work out. The two guys I had the highest hopes for, things didn't work out for them. I brought them from Texas Tech. I don't think, in hindsight, I probably shouldn't have done that. One of them was health reasons, and the other got caught in a campus political trap. And those things happen. I don't think I did them a good service. And if I had that to do all over again, I probably wouldn't have brought them along with me. But you live and learn.
Right.
And but all in all, it's been a good team and a group of people that have worked well together, worked for the same goals, and it had this mixture that's so important of veteran people and new people with new ideas willing to work together, and I think that's the key.
And so you're going through that whole process again of building that right team.
I am, and I've got, it's interesting out there, it's a University of New Mexico is a majority population of students. If you total up its Hispanic and Native American student population, it's probably close to 50% of the students.
Interesting.
But the administration is all white males right now. So I have to...
trying to play with that mix a little
bit. Yeah, I do. I have to diversify the leadership team there. And we'll do that. There'll be some people that stay, and then we'll have to bring in some people from the outside.
Well, you, in our first interview, talked about the 4 biggest issues facing higher education today were access, affordability, excellence, and student success. Do you think those are going to continue to be the most important issues in the next 5 or 20 years?
Yeah, I think they will. I mean, especially in states like Oklahoma and New Mexico, where you have a low per capita income, and you're trying to raise the state economically, and you look at your institutions of higher education, you've got to get more people into the higher ed system, and you've got to be more efficient and graduate them, but you also got to keep them in the state. It doesn't do much good to get them in here, spend Oklahoma taxpayer dollars to educate them, and then export them to Texas. And to do that, it has to be affordable. And if you're going to create those jobs, you have to have excellence in your research programs to bring high-tech companies in that will hire them. And, you know, where you have low per capita incomes and a small percentage of college graduates, public education tends to underperform. And so you really have to focus on student success. It's no victory at all to get a student to go to college if they flunk and drop out. That's a waste of money. I don't know that in states like California or Maryland that it will necessarily be those 4 things, but I can tell you in smaller states with low per capita income and not a lot of population growth, those are going to be the issues.
I wanted to move on and ask you 2 questions that I think are a little bit self-serving, but I think if any of my colleagues look at this interview later on, they'll be really disappointed if I don't ask you. You know, I've heard a lot of university presidents call the library the heart of the university. In your opinion, what is the role of the university library today in this digital age?
It's the intellectual center of the whole place. I mean, I can't imagine that that everyone associated with Oklahoma State is not coming through this library. I mean, it's where the knowledge is, and increasingly, you know, I love books. So you're talking to a person that loves. I mean, I maintain my own personal library. I never sell a book that I buy. I mean, I'm just a book hound, okay? And so I love libraries, and I like to see students use them. I like to see them use the books. I don't like to see them go online because I've learned enough in my profession, what's online is not always right. And I don't think we're doing enough to get students into our libraries to use the books. So I don't think that's going to change. I really don't, even with all this digital stuff. I think people are going to swing away from some of that. Now, some of it's good. You can get all your journals digitally. Mm-hmm. That's not a bad thing, okay? But there's still no substitute, in my opinion, for having a student come over here and dig through a stack of journals, find 5 articles, sit down and read them and try to make sense out of what they mean, instead of going online and in 30 minutes trying to get someone else's opinion about what they mean. I think that's not good. That's not education, in my opinion. That's just searching for information. It's not thinking.
Right. Well, I think we agree with you. To some extent, we are dependent on the kinds of assignments that faculty give mm-hmm. their students and what they deem as being, acceptable research.
Well, I taught a leadership class this year, and I asked my students to write a little blurb on Ed Wilson as a leader. Mm-hmm. We had him come and speak, right. And I have to say I was disappointed because we had them do it all electronically, and then we could run them through one of these little services, and we found that a lot of it was just lifted out of material off the internet. And I asked some students to do some additional stuff that I felt had gone too far in that direction. And I talked to them about it, and I don't think any of them did it. I mean, I think they really thought that's the way you
went about doing something.
And I tried to point out to them that, it's really not. What I'd hoped you'd do was get some of his books, look at them, maybe even read one, and you tell me what you thought of him as a leader, not what you read somebody else thought of him. And I think that that's one of the challenges we've got in education now. I mean, I loved it. When I was an undergraduate student, there was one Xerox machine on the Texas Tech campus. It was in the library. It cost you 10 cents a copy.
Wow, that's more than it costs now.
I know. And it made these crusty old copies, and it took forever. And so nobody used it. I went to the library every night to study. I went into the stacks, and I got journals out, and I read them, and I made notes on them, and I compared this one to that one, and I learned how to put the information base together and interpret what it means. And I don't think anything that technology has created can replace that. And there's a certain discipline in your mind that comes from doing that. And if all you do is get on some gadget and just start accumulating stuff and strip it out and stick it together and call it a paper, it's not a paper. It's something it's just a piece of information you collated. A paper should have some scholarship in it, and the scholarship is your interpretation, your thoughts. And that's what we don't that's what we don't have enough of in higher ed. And only the faculty can bring it back. A university president can't do that.
Well, moving on to something really practical as far as libraries go, everybody on this campus wants a bigger piece of the pie. So what advice do you have, if any, about how libraries can get a bigger piece of the university pie?
Well, I think you have to, the pie is going to have to come more from the private sector. There's always going to be a certain amount of public money for libraries, as there should be, but public funds anymore are not sustain everything that a library needs. And I think that Oklahoma State, like any other university, is going to have to place the library at a fairly high level in its fundraising priorities. And it's going to have to cultivate more Boone Pickenses. Mm-hmm. You know, people that understand that if you really want to help the academic mission, probably overall the best gift you can make is to the library. And before long, OSU's got to enlarge this library. And it's going to have to raise some public money, private money to do that. And that's, I think, something that all libraries have got to do more of, is they've got to get better at fundraising.
Well, and we've been appreciative of some of the gifts that you've steered in our direction that were people that weren't on our radar screen, but that you had contact with. I think about the Clerico gift for the renovation of the plaza. And
we had to do that. That plaza was in terrible shape. And you just can't have the library, the front door of the library, looking like that. But I think you made a friend in John, and he has more giving capacity. And I think Boone, Boone loves books.
Yes.
He really does. And I think that Boone is someone that the library should definitely cultivate. The Helmrichs, many good friends of OSU, understand the importance of this library to its mission, and I think you can get help.
Well, let me ask you now, I guess, sort of a concluding question, well, two concluding questions. One is that we've covered a lot of different topics. Is there anything that you wish that I had asked you about that I didn't?
Well, are you going to ask me what I think about the future of OSU and, what I think worked and what I think didn't?
Yes, that was kind of my concluding question.
Then if that's the case, then you've covered, I think, a pretty good spectrum of what we could possibly talk about without getting down to individuals,
right?
Which I really don't have any interest in doing.
Sure. Well, and I don't have any interest in doing that either. But
Good.
I am sort of interested in what you, now with approaching 2020 hindsight, what did work well here, what didn't, and what do you think the future holds for this institution?
Well, the future, I think, will hold good things. But the institution has still got to focus on getting more competitive with its sister institution, particularly in the fundraising area. And I look back on my time here, and I enjoyed every single second of it. And I really, really came to love this place, as Jim Halligan predicted I would. And I think the reason is the people. There are very good people associated with Oklahoma State. Its students, its faculty, its staff, its alums, its supporters are all good people. Oklahoma is a great state. It may not be the wealthiest state, but it's filled with big-hearted people. And I like living in Oklahoma a lot. And looking back over the university, I think there are some things it's got to be watchful of. One is that athletics cannot become the tail wagging the dog. That's the biggest challenge that I see in the future. It's got its own foundation now. Soon it'll have more money than the university foundation. How it's managed and the fact that it becomes managed as a part of the university and not the driving force of the university will be crucial to the future of the university. Otherwise, it's just going to be a big name athletic program dragging an academic program behind it. And that never works. It might work for a short time, but you won't sustain excellence in the athletic program if you don't improve the academic mission. The two really go hand in hand. And so I think the university has really got to watch that. And the biggest, the university has a great board, at least while I worked on it. But it rotates its leadership every year, and I think that's a real weakness.
Is that not typical?
No.
Oh, okay.
It's not typical for any board I've ever seen. I think that, you need leadership on a board just like you need leadership at an institution. And most universities that I know of, they have board chairmen that stay for a period of years. These are people that are rich in wisdom and leadership. They often have money, they direct support to the institution, and you create a consistency of leadership at the board level that matches the consistency of leadership at the institutional level. I know we had that at Texas Tech with Ed Whitaker, the CEO of AT&T, then SBC.
Okay, that's where I've heard that.
Yeah, and you saw it at the University of Oklahoma with Christy Everest.
Mm-hmm.
But here, the chairmanship rotates every year, and while they're wonderful people, I think all in all, it does not create enough of a consistency of leadership that it makes for a challenge, and it puts a lot of the power in the hand of the executive director of the board. And I don't think that's where you really want the leadership to reside. The other challenge is the foundation and the university have got to be closer together. I'm going to a university where we'll start a capital campaign. There, the head of the foundation is a vice president that reports to the university. The separateness of the foundation is the management of the funds.
Right.
But the leadership is through the university. And I think you have to realize too that there's not a lot of money in Stillwater. And the money that's going to be raised in the future for Oklahoma State's going to have to be raised outside of Stillwater. And I think there's going to have to be a fresh look at some things in the foundation, where you put development officers, how you manage all of that contributes to this fundraising effort, because the University of Oklahoma is far out raising us fund-wise, and we can't have that continue. And if I had it to do over again, I would have done more to address some of those issues. But all in all, I look back on my time here. I loved it. I loved the people I worked with. I liked every aspect of it. I liked the board, and I will leave here with nothing but good thoughts about Oklahoma State and its people.
And how do you want to be remembered?
Oh, I just want to be remembered as a guy that came in and I did my best. I tried to create a vision, a plan. I tried to get people unified around it, and I worked as hard as I conceivably could to achieve that. And the proof will be in the pudding over time, and we'll see. Hopefully it will taste good for a while.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you. I enjoyed it. It was fun.